To commit a sin of evil, it isn't something that we do by accident. So stay with me here. Every sin that a person commits is an evil act, but not every evil act is a sin. Welcome back to Stand Firm. I am Jerome Richter. I'm the Executive Vice President out at the University of Mary. I did mention in the last clip that we did that I love talking about virtue. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about virtue and the greatest of the virtues, and then also its counterpart, just to make sure that we all understand how best to live the moral life. And so virtue, as I've defined it for people that I've taught, people that I'm working with at the university, we have our athletic program is greatness through virtue. We believe that virtue is a very important thing, and it's also kind of, if you will, a starting ground for all people. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic, it doesn't matter if you're Christian. Everybody should be able to understand and to be able to talk virtue. I mean, where did we get the virtues from? But the ancients, the Greeks, kind of mastered this. They had the cardinal virtues, right? The ones that hinged. The four cardinal virtues, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they all talked about the virtues and what it means to live a virtuous life. But what is virtue? Well, the easiest way to define virtue is that it is a habitual choosing of the good. Now stay with me. It is a habitual choosing of the good. A virtue is a habit of choosing what is good. So, you're young, and every once in a while, you do the right thing. And mom and dad usually then will say, "Hey, good job, Johnny. That was wonderful. You were nice to your sister." The next time that you're with your sister, you punch her in the nose. Your parents aren't going to say a good job because you haven't formed a habit yet, because you're just oscillating back and forth. Now, if you all of a sudden can be nice to your sister 1,000 times in a row, you've formed a habit. Right? I think it's one of the books, these self-help books, that if you do something 10,000 times, it'll be a habit that you'll never forget. So if you're nice to your sister 10,000 times, young men, you will never be mean to your sister. Now it is a habitual choosing of the good. But the question is what is the good? And this is actually something that we have to ponder more today than we ever have before. I can choose, and I can consistently choose, but I have to choose the good. Well, what is the good? It's what God made the thing to be. It is the intended end of whatever it is that we're choosing or doing. So, for example, sex. What is God's intended end of sex? Unity and procreation. So if any time that sex is happening, but it's not open to unity and to life, it isn't meeting the Lord's ends. So if it isn't in marriage and open to life, it's not meeting the Lord's ends, so therefore it's not good. Here's another one for those that are a little bit more material-minded. I remember growing up on the farm, swathing. And in a swather you have knives, and if you hit something, you'll bust one of the knives, and they have these rivets on it. So you had to get out there with a chisel and a hammer, and you had to chisel off the top of the rivet, then you had to punch it out, you got to put a new one in. Well, if you were like me, a lot of times you didn't prepare your toolbox very well, and you busted a knife or a sickle section. You'd get out there, and I didn't have my chisel with. So I would grab out of the toolbox something that looks just like a chisel. It's called a flat screwdriver. And you grab that flat screwdriver and you start chiseling with it, and you have a hammer hitting the screwdriver, and before the rivet's even close to being done, guess what happened to the screwdriver? It's busted in two, the plastic handle's shot, the front is all dented, it's not going to work as a screwdriver anymore because I used a screwdriver as a chisel, and a screwdriver wasn't made to be a chisel. I didn't use it for its intended end. And that's the same thing with anything else when we're talking about goodness. It has to be to its intended end. So that's virtue, the habitual choosing of good, which gives us freedom, because now I don't have to sit there and be tempted each time because I've built up the habit. And so what is the greatest of all the virtues in the whole wide world? Well, we know it. St. Paul tells us. And the greatest of these is love. When I was teaching back in high school, I had two separate weeks for a unit that I taught. One was called Love Fest, and the other one was called Sin Stock. Because I think in our world today, people are not only confused about virtue, but they're very clearly confused about love, which is the greatest of all the virtues. And why is love the greatest of all the virtues, everyone? Well, you know this. Because faith, hope, and love that come from God, right, they're the theological virtues. When we die and are in heaven, we don't need hope anymore because we're already there. We don't need faith anymore because we're seeing God face to face. So what's the only thing that we're going to do for all eternity? We're going to love. Because it's the only thing that we will be doing is loving God as God loves us. So then, what is love? Well, love, very much like virtue, isn't so much the habit, but it's the very basis of virtue, which is the choice of goodness. So anytime that you make a choice of goodness, anytime that you choose what it should be for its intended end, and let's go back to sex, when a man and a woman get married, they're united in marriage, and they have relations, it is a very, very good thing because that's what God intended it. But if it's outside of that, it's very, very bad. So love is to choose what is good. And here's the thing, we don't give ourselves enough credit. Every day that we wake up, all day, all throughout the day, we have the choice to love. And I'm saying, everyone, we're not talking about the big, bold ones with like, should I take a bullet for that guy who's being robbed at the bank? No. How about this? Start with brushing your teeth, right? It's a loving act to brush your teeth. It'll be better for everyone that's around you. Young men, shower. That's an important thing to do. The rest of society is better. How about this? How about obeying all traffic rules? Try to imagine how chaotic the world would be if we weren't loving enough to follow the rules. And so we're constantly loving each other throughout our day. And yes, it's not big, bold things, but we also have to give ourselves credit that that is love because we're choosing what is good, the choice of goodness. What is the opposite of love? Well, I hope you guys know it. It's sin, right? The opposite of love is sin. The opposite of good is evil. So if love is the choice of goodness, then sin must be the choice of evil. And that's exactly what it is. Now, sin complicates everything, right? And so even in the definition of sin, I got to go a little bit deeper because, right, evil complicates things. So love is a choice of goodness. We do what is good. We do what is true. We love each other. We're growing closer to Christ. We're growing in virtue. We're growing closer to heaven. We're growing closer to all eternity and God himself. When we sin, we're committing a choice of evil. But to commit a sin of evil, we have to be very careful here. It isn't something that we do by accident. So stay with me here. Every sin that a person commits is an evil act. But not every evil act is a sin. Get that? Every sin that is committed is an evil act. But not every evil act that happens is a sin. Because to sin, you need to have freedom, you need to have knowledge, and then you need to do it. So, for example, let's go back to my example of sex. If a young woman, God forbid, is raped, she did the act of relations, but she had no freedom. So therefore, it cannot be a sin for her. But is it still an evil act? Yes. She participated in it, but it's not anything that she's held bound. An accident, right? You're driving a car, the sun's shining, another car pulls out, you hit him. That's an evil act. It's destruction. Somebody could have died, but it's surely not a sin, but it's still an evil act. Because of original sin and what has happened, we still have to deal with those things. And then we also talk about the knowledge. Try to imagine, everyone, how sad it is that so many people don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know what to be choosing. They don't even know what goodness is. And so, in our society today, we must be more patient, empathetic, and merciful to so many people that are just doing really crazy stuff. I mean, I think about young people, especially in the world that we live today, that are 10 and 12 years old, that are saying, I'm transgender and I want to have a sex change. They don't even know what they're talking about. I mean, we really have to be sympathetic to them and to pray for them around these things. I've met a couple very rabid culture of death people, pro-abortionists. They don't really know what they're talking about. They've just made this all of a sudden up into their most important thing. And so we have to try to be as kind as we can to them because they don't know what love is. They don't know what sin is. And if you don't know what love and sin is and you don't know what you're aiming for, you don't know what goodness is, this is going to be a very hard thing for you. And life is going to be a hard thing. But if we recognize every day, everyone, that every choice that we make can be a loving choice, and we do that in great faith, much like Saint Teresa, told us to do all the little things with great love, it can be a beautiful life. And I have to remind myself of that all the time, every day. But it is the chance that we have as Christians that have the gift, that have the knowledge, that have the graces, so that we can love and we can love well. Thank you, everyone. It's been a joy to be with you. I'm signing off here from Stand Firm, Jerome Richter. God bless you all.